The marble floors of the Henderson estate gleamed under the afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Victoria Henderson stood in the doorway of her study, her tailored grey suit as sharp as the expression on her face. She'd built a technology empire from nothing, turned a small startup into a billion-dollar corporation, but nothing had prepared her for the helplessness she felt watching her daughter struggle. 8-year-old Emma sat on the living room floor, her blonde hair falling across her face as she stared at a book she couldn't hear being read aloud. Born profoundly deaf, Emma had learned to navigate a silent world with remarkable grace. But Victoria saw the loneliness in her daughter's eyes, the way she watched other children laugh at jokes she couldn't hear, the way she stood apart at birthday parties. They'd tried everything. The best doctors in New York, specialists from Boston, audiologists from around the world. The answer was always the same: Emma's condition was complex, possibly genetic, and current hearing aid technology simply wasn't enough. A cochlear implant had been discussed, but the risks were significant, and Victoria couldn't bear the thought of putting her daughter through surgery with uncertain outcomes. "Mrs. Henderson?" A gentle voice came from behind her. Victoria turned to see Marcus Webb, the building maintenance supervisor who'd worked at the estate for the past 3 months. He was in his late 30s, wearing his navy blue work uniform, and holding what appeared to be a small centipede in his weathered hands. "Marcus," Victoria said, her tone professional but weary. "Is something wrong?" "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mom," Marcus said, his voice calm and measured. "But I noticed Emma in the living room, and I thought, well, I wondered if I might show her something." "With your permission, of course." Victoria glanced back at her daughter, then at Marcus. There was something in his eyes, a kindness, a understanding that made her curious rather than defensive. "What did you have in mind?" "I'd like to show her how a centipede hears," Marcus said simply. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" Marcus smiled gently. "If you'll allow me a moment with Emma, I think I can explain something that might help her feel less alone. I promise I won't touch her or make her uncomfortable in any way." Something in Victoria's chest loosened. Perhaps it was exhaustion from years of fighting an invisible enemy. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence in Marcus's voice. She nodded slowly. "All right, but I'll be right here." Marcus walked into the living room and knelt down a respectful distance from Emma. The little girl looked up, her blue eyes curious but cautious. Marcus waited until he had her attention, then held up the centipede, making sure Emma could see it clearly. He began to sign, his hands moving with practiced fluency. Victoria's breath caught. She'd learned some sign language to communicate with Emma, but Marcus's movements were smooth, natural, the signs of someone who'd spent years in the deaf community. Emma's eyes widened as she watched Marcus's hands. He was explaining something about the centipede, his expression animated but gentle. Then Marcus did something extraordinary. He held the centipede near Emma's arm and not touching her, but close enough for her to feel the air movement as the tiny creature's many legs shifted. Marcus signed again, explaining how centipedes don't hear with ears like humans do. They feel vibrations through their legs, through their entire bodies. They experience the world through touch, through sensation, through ways that have nothing to do with sound. Emma's face transformed. For the first time in months, Victoria saw wonder replace resignation in her daughter's expression. Marcus continued, pulling out his phone and showing Emma videos he'd apparently prepared. Videos of elephants communicating through ground vibrations that traveled for miles. Whales singing songs that crossed oceans, felt as much as heard. Spiders detecting prey through the trembling of their webs. But then Marcus showed Emma something else. He pulled out a small wooden box from his pocket and opened it carefully. Inside was a device Victoria had never seen before. Not a standard hearing aid, but something different. Something that looked almost handmade. Marcus began to sign again, and Victoria moved closer to read his hands. "When I was 12, Marcus signed. My younger sister lost her hearing to meningitis. I watched her change from a happy, outgoing girl to someone who felt broken. The hearing aids didn't work well for her, and she felt isolated. So I started studying, not medicine, yeah, I couldn't afford medical school, but engineering, acoustics, vibration theory. Emma leaned forward, completely absorbed. I worked as a janitor through college, Marcus continued, his signs deliberate and clear. Maintenance jobs paid for my classes. I learned that sound is just vibration, and if we can't fix the ear, maybe we can change how the vibration reaches the brain. He held up the device. This isn't a hearing aid. It's a tactile sound translator. It converts sound waves into patterns of vibration on the skin. Different frequencies create different patterns. With practice, the brain learns to interpret these patterns, not as hearing, exactly, but as something else. Something unique. Victoria felt her heart pounding. Does it work? She asked aloud, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus looked up at her, his expression honest. It worked for my sister. She can feel conversations now, music, her daughter's laughter. It's not the same as hearing, but it's not silence anymore either. It's something in between. Something beautiful in its own way. Emma was watching Marcus's lips now, reading them with the skill she'd developed. Her hands moved in signs. Can I try? Marcus looked to Victoria, who found herself nodding despite her logical mind screaming about medical protocols and proper testing. She'd spent years following proper channels, and her daughter was still silent and isolated. It's completely non-invasive, Marcus explained aloud for Victoria's benefit. It's just a small patch that sits behind the ear. No surgery, no risk. She can take it off anytime she wants. With Victoria's permission, Marcus gently placed the small device behind Emma's ear. It was barely visible, the size of a quarter. He then pulled out a small speaker and signed to Emma, I'm going to play some music. Tell me what you feel. He pressed play on his phone. Soft piano music filled the room. Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of Victoria's favorites from before Emma was born. Emma's eyes went wide. Her small hand reached up to touch the device, then moved to her chest. Her lips parted in amazement. I feel it, she signed, her movements quick with excitement, like butterflies on my neck. And here she touched her collarbone, like water ripples. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. She hadn't let herself cry in years, maintaining the strong, composed exterior that had carried her through boardrooms and business deals. But watching her daughter experience music for the first time shattered every wall she'd built. Marcus changed the song to something with a stronger beat. Emma laughed a sound Victoria had rarely heard and began moving her hands to the rhythm she was feeling. She wasn't hearing it the way Victoria heard it, but she was experiencing it. She was part of it. How? Victoria asked, her voice breaking. How did you develop this? Why are you working as a janitor if you've created something so revolutionary? Marcus stood, his expression humble. Because patent attorneys are expensive, Mrs. Henderson. Clinical trials cost millions. I've been working maintenance jobs for 15 years, saving every penny, trying to get this device properly tested and approved. I've helped about 40 people in the deaf community, all off the books, all free of charge. But to make it widely available, to help thousands, I'd need resources I don't have. Victoria stared at this man in a maintenance uniform who'd done more for her daughter in 10 minutes than a parade of expensive specialists had done in 8 years. She thought about her empire, her resources, her connections. Marcus, she said, her voice steady now, filled with purpose. How would you feel about a business partner? He looked startled. Mom, you've spent 15 years developing this technology while working maintenance jobs, Victoria said. I've spent 15 years building a technology company with resources and connections you need. My daughter is feeling music for the first time because you never gave up on your sister. I think it's time we stopped working separately. Emma was spinning now, feeling a waltz, her face glowing with joy. She signed something to her mother, and Victoria's voice caught as she translated aloud. She says the music tickles. She says it's the most beautiful thing she's ever felt. Marcus's own eyes grew damp. My sister says the same thing. She says it's not hearing, It's something better. It's feeling the soul of sound. Over the following months, Victoria learned Marcus's full story, how he'd studied acoustical engineering through night classes, how he'd spent years researching in public libraries, teaching himself neuroscience and signal processing, how he'd worked every maintenance job he could find because they allowed him time to think, to design, to quietly help people while saving for the approvals he needed. She learned about his sister, Rebecca, who now taught art to deaf children, using Marcus's device to help them experience music and environmental sounds in entirely new ways. She learned about the small community of people Marcus had helped, a quiet network of deaf individuals who'd found new ways to connect with the world. Victoria used her resources to get Marcus's device properly tested, patented, and approved. She created a new division in her company dedicated to accessibility technology, with Marcus as the chief innovation officer. They worked together to refine the device, to make it smaller, more effective, more beautiful. But the real transformation wasn't in the technology or the business. It was in Emma. The little girl who'd been quiet and withdrawn blossomed. She wore her device proudly, explaining to anyone who asked that she didn't hear like they did as she felt sound, which was actually much more interesting. She started a blog, with Victoria's help, documenting her experiences for other deaf children. She wrote about feeling her mother's voice like gentle rain, feeling orchestral music like fireworks under her skin, feeling laughter like tiny bubbles. One evening, a year after that first meeting, Victoria found Marcus cleaning the windows in her study. She'd offered him an office, insisted on it, but he'd kept his maintenance position, saying the work helped him think. "You know you don't have to clean windows anymore," Victoria said gently. Marcus smiled. "I know, but I like it. Keeps me grounded. Reminds me where innovation really comes from, and not from fancy labs, but from people who need solutions and refuse to accept that none exist." Emma ran in, still in her school uniform, her device visible behind her ear like a badge of honor. She signed rapidly, telling them about the music class she'd attended that day, about how her teacher had let her place her hands on the piano while it played so she could feel the vibrations directly. "She says music is better than she ever imagined," Victoria translated, her voice full of wonder. Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, signing back. "That's because you're experiencing it in your own unique way. Not better or worse than hearing it, just different. Just yours." Emma hugged Marcus, then pulled back and signed something that made both adults pause. "She wants to know," Victoria said softly, "if you'll teach her how to build devices like yours. She says when she grows up, she wants to help other kids feel the music too." Marcus looked at Emma with profound respect. "I would be honored," he signed. As Victoria watched her daughter and the janitor turned innovator discuss future designs, she realized something profound. She'd spent her life believing that success meant building empires, accumulating wealth, commanding respect in boardrooms. But true success, she now understood, was much simpler and more complex. It was a man who spent 15 years cleaning buildings while revolutionizing how people experience sound. It was a daughter who turned what others called a disability into a unique and beautiful way of being in the world. It was the moment when pride and presumption gave way to wonder and humility. The billionaire's daughter hadn't been fixed or cured. She'd been met where she was, with dignity and creativity and profound respect. And in that meeting, everyone had been transformed. That evening, Victoria stood by Emma's bedroom door, watching her daughter sleep. The device sat on the nightstand, its light blinking softly. Tomorrow, Emma would put it on again and feel her mother's good morning, would feel the music at school, would feel the world vibrating with life and sound. But tonight, in the silence she'd known since birth, Emma smiled in her dreams. Because silence wasn't absence anymore. It was just one way of being in a world that had room for infinite variations of experience. And somewhere in the building, Marcus continued his rounds, checking locks and turning off lights, a janitor with a doctorate's worth of knowledge, carried not on degrees but in the countless lives he'd quietly changed. A reminder that transformation often comes not from those who shout loudest about their credentials, but from those who work steadily in the background, driven by love and refusing to accept that anyone should feel broken simply for being different. The marble floors gleamed in the moonlight, witness to the truth Victoria had finally learned. Sometimes the most valuable things come not from having everything, but from meeting someone who has very little except the one thing that matters most, to the refusal to give up on making the world more beautiful for those they love.